This lecture by Dr. Rakhi More. Dr. Rakhi More has done her MBBS from Pravara Medical College, Loni, and her MD in Anatomy from Grant Medical College, Mumbai. She has a teaching experience of more than 18 years and has been associated with Dr. Lakshmi Vas since the past 15 years. Ma'am is going to help us revise our anatomy using beautiful videos of her cadaveric dissections of the back anatomy. So I now hand over to Dr. Rakhi More.
Good morning everyone. I am Dr. Rakhi More. Welcome everyone for the ultrasound guided dry needling workshop at the Ashirvad Institute of Pain Management and Research for the year 2021. We will be talking today about the anatomy of the back and the anatomy of the lower limb. As madam has already told you about the importance of anatomy, I think I do not emphasize it more, but I have also learned many things along with ma'am. It is not that she has only learned, it is because of her urge to learn that I have really looked into the back anatomy and the lower limb anatomy and other parts of the anatomy in with respect to the view of a pain specialist. So let us start with the anatomy of the back first. Okay. I will obviously put in some inputs as an anatomist also. So you may find some slides a bit childish. I have been used to teaching first year MBBS students. So let us first take some introduction about the back. It is the posterior aspect of the trunk of the body and it provides musculoskeletal access of support for the trunk. What are the functions of the back? First, it is support function, then movements and protection of the nervous system. Now, as you can see in this image which shows the support, the core strength is very important and that is why the importance of back muscles. Okay. Now the muscles of the back are divided into two groups. One is an extrinsic group and one is an intrinsic group. You can see in these two diagrams, on the left you can see the extrinsic group muscles. Here we can see the muscles of the superficial layers, and these are the muscles which have migrated from the other areas other than the back. These do not take origin from the back itself. The next layer is the intrinsic group of muscles. Now these muscles take origin and insertion in the back itself. So extrinsic group, embryological origin from location other than the back, and these are innervated by the anterior rami of the spinal nerves. These are again divided into two, that is a superficial group and an intermediate group. The intrinsic group of muscles, they develop in the back and are innervated by the posterior rami of the spinal nerves. And these are the deep group of muscles which help in the movements of the vertebral column and the head. Now superficial group of muscles, they lie immediately deep to the skin and the superficial fascia. They attach the upper limb to the axial skeleton and they help in the movements of the upper limb. So as we have already divided them into three groups, the extrinsic which consists of the superficial and the intermediate group, and the intrinsic which consists of the deep group. The superficial, they lie immediately deep to the skin and the superficial fascia and attach the upper limb to the axial skeleton and they help in the movement of the upper limb. Now which are these muscles? These are the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi, rhomboid major, rhomboid minor and the levator scapulae. So these are the 5 muscles which belong to the superficial group. We are not going to discuss too much in detail about the upper back muscles because the topic of the workshop today is lower back muscles. So we will just go through the images of these muscles, that is the trapezius, rhomboid major, rhomboid minor and levator scapulae. We will see the latissimus dorsi later. Now the next group is the intermediate group of muscles. This also falls into the extrinsic group of muscles and the primary function of these muscles is a respiratory function. These lie immediately deep to the muscles of the superficial group. These are the serratus posterior superior and the serratus posterior inferior. You can see the two groups of muscles. They take origin from the ribs and get attached to the vertebral column. Sorry, they take origin from the vertebral column and get attached to the ribs, the superior group and the inferior group. This is how thin the serratus posterior, superior and the inferior muscle is. You can see most of it is made up of tendon and only a few fleshy fibers can be seen. Now we come to the deep group of muscles. These muscles, they cover the whole of the back. So they extend from the pelvis to the skull, and the muscles include again three groups. So deep group again includes three group of muscles. The first group is the extensors and rotators of the head and the neck. Second group is the extensors and the rotators of the vertebral column. And third group is the short segmental muscles. So these are the three groups. So the first group, that is extensors and rotators of the head and the neck, it consists of the splenius capitis and the splenius cervicis. So this group of muscles which extends from the spine of the vertebra to the transverse process is called as the spinotransversales, and this mostly belongs to the upper part of the back only. So these are the extensors and rotators of the head and the neck, that is the splenius capitis and the splenius cervicis. The next group is the extensors and rotators of the vertebral column. Now this consists of a longitudinal group of muscles which is the erectus spinae and an oblique group of muscles which is the transversospinales. Now as the name suggests, we can know that they run from the transverse process to the spinous process. So the direction of the muscles of the first group, that is the extensors and rotators of the head and the neck, and the oblique group of the extensors and rotators of the vertebral column, is opposite to each other. So transversospinales, which forms the oblique group, and the last group is the short segmental muscles, which consist of the interspinales and the intertransversae. So the first group of the muscles, that is the extensors and the rotators of the head and the neck, it consists of the spinotransversales muscles which run from the spinous process to the transverse process, and these are the splenius capitis and the splenius cervicis. Now both these muscles take origin together from the lower half of the ligamentum nuchae and upper 4 to 6 thoracic vertebrae. From here they will run laterally because they arise from the spine and get inserted into the transverse process. So they will run laterally. The splenius capitis gets inserted into the mastoid process, lateral 1/3 of the superior nuchal line, and the splenius cervicis, it gets inserted into the posterior tubercles of the upper 4 cervical vertebrae. Now actions of the splenius capitis and splenius cervicis, both sides muscles acting together, they will extend the head. Only one-sided muscle, if it acts, it will draw the head and turn the face to the same side. Okay, so these are the actions of the splenius capitis and the splenius cervicis, that is the first group of muscles which belong to the deep layer. The second group is the extensors and the rotators of the vertebral column. Now this group consists of the erectus spinae and transversospinales. So erectus spinae muscle, you can see in this diagram, the two groups of muscles are seen. The left image shows the erectus spinae in the colored image, that is the 3 layers of the erectus spinae muscle itself. We will see that in the next image. So erectus spinae, it is also known as the sacrospinalis. It extends from the sacrum to the skull. It lies deep to the posterior layer of the thoracolumbar fascia. The serratus posterior, inferior and the superior, and the splenius muscles. So these are the layers which are superficial to the erectus spinae muscle. So we see again it is extending right from the sacrum to the skull. So it is also known as the sacrospinalis and lies deep to the posterior layer of the thoracolumbar fascia, serratus posterior, inferior and superior, and the splenius muscles, which we have already seen. Now, erector spinae muscles, it is divided into three groups: the iliocostalis, longissimus, and the spinalis. Now, you can see the three muscles from lateral to medial. The iliocostalis is the one which is attached to the ribs. So, from the ilium to the rib, and it is divisible into three parts, that is lumborum, thoracis, and cervicis. So, it can be seen till the level of the neck. So, it is divisible into lumborum, thoracis, and cervicis. The median group, that is the longissimus, it is divisible into thoracis, cervicis, and capitis. So, there are again three parts of this layer, that is the longissimus, which the majority parts is in the thoracic region, then the cervical region, and the head region. The spinalis again is divisible into three parts, that is the thoracis, cervicis, and capitis. So it is majorly covering the upper part of the back, the neck, and the head region. Origin of the erector spinae, it has a U-shaped origin. It takes origin from the lower two thoracic and lumbar spines, median and lateral sacral crest, and inner part of the dorsal segment of the iliac crest and adjoining ligaments. Action, it is a chief extensor of the back. Now the muscle insertion, we have seen that it has three parts. The erector spinae has three parts, that is the iliocostalis, longissimus, and spinalis, from lateral to the medial aspect of the back. So iliocostalis, the three parts of iliocostalis are the lumborum, thoracis, and cervicis. These are inserted by a series of relays into angles of ribs and into the posterior tubercles of cervical spines of C4, cervical vertebra of C4 to C6. Insertion of one slip is followed by origin of other slip from its medial side. The longissimus again is divisible into thoracis, cervicis, and capitis, and it is inserted into the lumbar accessory process and the transverse processes. Transverse processes of the adjacent ribs of T2 to T12, and transverse cervicis is inserted into transverse processes of C2 to C6, and capitis is inserted in the mastoid process deep to the splenius capitis and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. The spinalis is inserted in the upper to the lower cervical spines. So these are all the insertions of the erector spinae muscles, and that is why it covers the whole of the spine.
Where do the rhomboids come in here? The superficial?
Superficial. Yeah.
So though they are in the second layer, they are considered as superficial.
Yeah. The question ma'am asked was, how are the rhomboids placed over here? Now, as we have already said, the rhomboids are belonging to the superficial group. So, the superficial group, the trapezius, once we reflect the trapezius, we will see the rhomboids and the levator scapulae. Once we reflect the rhomboids, then we will see the deeper muscle.
So you don't call it superficial, intermediate, and deep with the serratus posterior as the deep. You just call that as the deep, and this is the superficial.
Serratus posterior is the middle layer.
Middle layer.
Middle layer.
Then what is the deep layer? Are these?
Deep layer are the erector spinae muscles. Okay, so the classification which we have seen earlier is that the superficial consists of the 5 muscles: trapezius, latissimus dorsi, rhomboid major, minor, and levator scapulae. These they are classified according to the function. So the function of these muscles is the movement of the upper limb, and the middle layer, that is the serratus posterior, superior, and the inferior, is the respiratory function, and deeper layer is basically the movement of the vertebral column. Okay. So the next layer Now the next group of muscles in this second layer only is the transversospinal muscles. So these lie under cover of the erector spinae and consist of the number of oblique muscles which extend medially from the transverse process to the spines. So we have seen the first group of muscles of belonging to the deep layer, that is the spinotransversals, which move the head and the neck. These are the extensors and the rotators of the head and the neck. This is the first group in the deep muscles. The second group in the deep muscles is the erector spinae and the transversospinals. This is the second group in the deep muscles. Now this erector spinae is a longitudinal muscle and transversospinal is an oblique muscle running from the transverse process to the spines. Okay, so we have seen the origin and the insertion of these muscles. The muscle slips are so small that it is difficult to appreciate the muscle slips in an embalmed cadaver. So here we only see the most of the time the theoretical part, and practically when you approach the muscles, you have to approach them layer wise below the latissimus dorsi. Now we come to the oblique group of muscles in the second layer, that is the transversospinal muscle. These lie under cover of the erector spinae and they consist of number of oblique muscles which extend medially from the transverse processes to the spine. Now these are again divided into three groups. One is the semispinalis, then the multifidus and rotators. Now these groups are divided according to their position from superficial to deep. So the semispinalis is most superficial in this group, then the multifidus, and the deepest is the rotators. So the semispinalis again is divisible into the thoracis, cervicis and the capitis part, then the multifidus and the rotators, which are divisible into the lumborum, thoracis and the cervicis part. It is the same group of muscle, but depending on the part of the vertebral column where they are developed more, the functions are named accordingly. So the rotators are mostly more developed in the thoracic region. Semispinalis is more developed in the cervical and the capitis region. Okay. So thoracis, transverse process of the lower thoracic vertebra to the spinous process of the upper thoracic and the lower cervical vertebra. Cervicis, the transverse process of the upper thoracic and spinous process of C2 to C4, and capitis, transverse process of upper thoracic and lower cervical T5 to T4. Insertion is on the medial part of the area between superior and the inferior nuchal lines. I know it is difficult to imagine and it is difficult to remember the origin and insertion of all the muscles, but you will have to see the images again and again, and you will have to actually remember the layers of the muscles. Origin insertion aa jata hai baad mein.
Actually, for USGDM, it's not so much the origin
Origin
and
insertion.
insertion, but the location of the muscle that is
Yeah.
most important for us.
Yeah.
And you see, like you said that serratus posterior, superior and inferior are barely seen,
Yeah.
but in sonoanatomy, so what? Actually, what I was saying was the origin and insertion of the muscles is not so very important in ultrasound guided dry needling as knowing the layers. For example, now Rakhi was talking about the serratus posterior, superior and inferior being just a slip of fascia. But when you look at it under ultrasound, below the rhomboids or below the levator scapulae, you see one more layer, and then the rib comes and the intercostals come. So that has to be the serratus posterior superior, and you see it quite regularly. Quite regularly you see it. So, and semispinalis is something which is a very interesting muscle, because semispinalis should be called the atlas. Because, are you giving me the camera?
Yes,
Yeah. See, if you look at my hand like this, okay, this, can you see? Yeah.
We can't see because the slide is there.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, we are making our camera person run around, because when there is a speaker, others are not supposed to be around talking. See, what happens is, if you look at it like this, the palm, which is horizontal, is like the insertion of semispinalis. This is the semispinalis muscle. So actually, if you want a mnemonic for semispinalis, you should call it the atlas, because it is as if it is holding the head up, really, and it sort of becomes like a mushroom, a thin slip of muscle. It's not very thin, but it is thin enough. But at its insertion, suddenly it mushrooms into a big thing between those nuchal lines. So if you look at it, you appreciate how much work it is doing in holding the head up. This is the main muscle which holds the head up about probably 14 to 16 hours a day. So it's doing a tremendous amount of work, and it's a wonder that more people do not get pain in this muscle. But most patients, there are people who come with pain at the bottom of the head, very common. They wake up in the middle of the night with these severe pains. Always, this is the history when they come like this. And when I hear that history, I know it is semispinalis which is the problem. And you can see it very well on ultrasound, which of course we are not dealing with the neck, so I won't show it. But or maybe I'll just show it when we are doing the thing. Yeah, can we have Rakhi speaking again, please?
Yes,
No, it is good, ma'am. Discussion होता है तो फिर अच्छा लगता है. नहीं तो it becomes very monotonous, especially anatomy. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So as madam has already said, semispinalis is a very important muscle. Now we come to the next group of muscles, that is the multifidus. Now this lies deep to the semispinalis. These are short oblique bundles, and each bundle is triangular in shape. This is just for the discussion part. This may not be of very much importance to you, as madam has said ki the layers are more important. Okay. Now multifidus, it has its origin on the dorsal surface of the sacrum between the spinous and the transverse crest, from the mammillary processes in the lumbar region, transverse processes in the thoracic region, and articular processes in the cervical region. And it crosses around 3 to 5 vertebrae. So one multifidus muscle will cover up around 3 to 5 vertebrae and insert in the spine of a higher vertebrae. So in this diagram on the right hand side, the upper diagram, you can see the layers which you encounter when you reach the multifidus muscle. So from the superficial to the deep, we can see the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi.
Can you put a pointer?
There's no pointer over here. इसमें pointer नहीं आ रहा. I don't know why.
It's Mac, no?
Yeah.
Say Control L, you will get a red point. You will get a red point. The cursor becomes red. Not coming.
Not coming.
Okay, Jana.
Okay. Normally zoom में आता है. Normally आता है Zoom में, I don't know why it's not coming. Okay, so in the diagram on the right hand side, the upper diagram, we can see the layers which we will encounter to reach the multifidus. So the layers are the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi, the serratus posterior. From the lateral aspect, we can see the iliocostalis muscle, the longissimus, the spines, which are the part of the images in purple, the markings in purple are the erectus spinae. Deeper to that will be the semispinalis, deeper to that will be the multifidus, and the deepest will be the rotators. So between the spine and the transverse process, you can see the three layers in green. These are the semispinalis, multifidus, and the rotators. So when you are approaching the muscles from the posterior aspect, you will first cross over the superficial muscles, that is the muscles which belong to the superficial layer, that is the trapezius and the latissimus dorsi, which are marked in red. Then you will cross the serratus posterior superior, that is the middle layer of muscle, which is marked in blue. Then the deep group, which consists of the erectus spinae and the which is marked in purple, and the deepest you will come is the semispinalis, multifidus, and the rotators. So these are the muscles placed layer wise on the posterior aspect.
This is the thorax.
Thorax. Okay. Now the deepest group of muscles, as you can see in the diagram also, is the rotators. It takes origin from the root of one transverse process to the root of the spinous process or lamina next above. So it covers only one vertebra, unlike the multifidus, which runs around 3 to 5 vertebrae at the higher level. And these are best developed in the thoracic region. Now that is what rotators are also again divided into three parts, that is the lumborum, thoracis, and cervicis.
One question here.
My mic lesion.
No, doesn't matter. You can repeat. Why are they best developed in thorax?
Because rotation is more commonly seen in the thorax. So the rotator muscles which have a rotator function, they are developed more in the thoracic
I
region.
would think that the thorax rotates very little. It will be the lumbar region which rotates like this.
No, the rotation is more in the thoracic region. Lumbar mein rotation is not more.
But the thorax moves as one unit, isn't it?
It moves. See, ma'am, for the respiratory function also, when the ribs have to rotate, the slight movement at the level of the angle of the rib will produce more action on the thoracic cage as such. That is why the small movements of the rotators is important.
So actually, though the thorax looks as if it's a fixed area, there are small movements which happen at the rotation as a rotatory movement. This is what I wanted to emphasize, that it looks as if the whole thorax moves on top of the L1-2 area, but there are small movements which are happening at the thoracic level.
And the movements which look minimal at the posterior end, at the level of the rotator muscle, they are enhanced at the anterior level, anterior aspect at the level of the sternum.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is why the respiratory movements also, the pump handle movement and the bucket handle movements, that's the lateral movements, that is bucket handle movement, and the pump handle movement, that is the anterior movement of the sternum. These also are help along with the movement of the rotators. Okay. Finally, we come to the last group of muscles, that is the segmental back muscles, and these muscles consist of the levator costarum and the interspinales and the intertransversi. So these are the muscles which are present, which are again short segmental muscles. The levator costarum, you can see that they are attached to the transverse process and the ribs in the thoracic region, and the intertransversi between the two transverse processes, adjacent transverse processes, and the interspinals, between the adjacent spinous processes. The interspinals, they are well developed in the cervical and the lumbar region, and these are paired muscles. Intertransversae, they are connected to the, they connect the transverse process of the vertebra. This may not be of very much importance to you, but the only important thing over here in the cervical region, it consists of the anterior and the posterior slips, and they are separated by the ventral ramus of the spinal nerves. Now developmentally, the anterior slip is supplied by the ventral ramus, while the posterior slip is supplied by the dorsal ramus. The anterior and the posterior slips of the muscles. So anterior slip is supplied, belongs to the ventral group of muscles. So it is supplied by the ventral ramus,
anterior.
and the posterior group, posterior slip is supplied by the dorsal ramus of the spinal nerve.
What I wanted to say here is, from the anatomical point of view and from its size, the intertransversus muscles are just little bits of muscle, really speaking. But these are very, very important when it comes to pain, because as she mentioned here, the roots are nerve root is coming through the two transverse slips, which means if these muscles are tight, entrapment is 100% happening, and you do get these problems, and you will get a typical radicular pattern, and you will get, if you look at the MRI, there will be no disc to explain this radicular pain. But actually it is these muscle slips which have gone into intense spasm, and they do not release unless you really go and do something about it. In fact, I have always wondered whether transforaminal epidural works because we go through the intertransversus muscle. All of you who are giving transforaminal epidural know that just before you hit the safe zone of the bone, or if you come into the Cambin's triangle also, wherever it is, there is about 2 to 3 mm of very hard muscle resistance. You get this almost in 90%, 95% of patients. It is the intertransversus muscle which is so very tight like this. In fact, I have purposely many times left the needle as soon as I encounter the resistance, or sometimes you feel as if you hit bone. But after a minute or so, when you turn to the other side to pick up the syringe and then come back and attach it to the needle, in that time the muscle relaxes, and what you felt as bone, actually you can push the needle in by another 2-3 mm. So this led me to understand that intertransversus muscle is very important. And when you look at the diagrams here, it doesn't look as if it is so close to the nerve root. But in one of our dissections, I made Rakhi show me the intertransversus muscle in a cadaver, and I found that it is literally hugging the nerve. It can entrap the nerve very, very well. In fact, I think in my mechanical backache talk, I will be showing you our nurse who works in our clinic. She has a fairly normal looking MRI, but she was crying with pain, with radicular pain. And so in her, I could do this experiment. I did trigger injections into these muscles, the psoas and the intertransversus muscle. And her, I have the dye spreads to show you that, so I will show it to you. Yeah, below the pedicle. And she's had very good relief. I think I'll be showing her video. So coming back to the intertransversus muscle, it's a very important muscle in pain. It's an unimportant muscle to surgeons because they simply take it out when they are doing laminectomy. Whereas, and to anatomists and for other considerations, it's an insignificant muscle. But for pain specialists, it has to be a very important muscle.
Now, as ma'am said, in this diagram, you can see that it's a very big muscle and there's lots of space over here. But actually, when you go to see the dissection, you will not see the layers differently. You will not be able to appreciate the layers because there is too much crowding in this area. So,
It was so difficult for you to show it also.
it is very difficult. And to just complete the talk, the intertransversi also has a thoracic and the lumbar part. Again, the same. The medial part of the thoracic region, it lies between the transverse processes, and the lateral part, it becomes the levator costarum. Now, developmentally, the vertebral column in the thoracic region, just because the ribs are attached over there, the thoracic part, in the thoracic region, the lateral part will be known as the levator costarum. While in the other regions, the rib element is not there. That is why we have the different parts of the of the intertransversa muscle. Here in the lumbar region, the lateral part connects to the costal elements of the lumbar vertebra, because the costal elements are absorbed in the vertebra itself in the cervical region and the lumbar region. And while in the rib, in the thoracic region, it transforms to form the rib. So that is why the muscles which are in the thoracic region, they form the levator costarum, while they only form the part of the intertransversi in the cervical and the lumbar region.
Levator costarum means it lifts the.
Yeah, elevates the rib. Levator costarum also helps in elevation of the ribs. And again, as I said, the small actions in this region are enhanced in the anterior part of the thoracic wall. Now, nerve supply of the muscles of the back is by the dorsal rami of the spinal nerves. This is all about the muscles of the back. One slide I wanted to show regarding the muscles of the posterior abdominal wall. Though this is not a part of my talk, the muscles in the posterior abdominal wall, as you can see from the posterior aspect, we can see the thoracolumbar fascia, which is giving origin to the transverse abdominis muscles on the left side, and we can see on the right side the quadratus lumborum muscle. In the image on the left side, there is a QL labeled the quadratus lumborum muscle. If we see the posterior abdominal wall from the inner aspect, we can see the attachment of the diaphragm. Now, this diaphragm, it shows the medial and the lateral arcuate ligament, and this it is a part of the thoracolumbar fascia, which will continue anteriorly as the fascia transversalis. So, here is the attachment of the diaphragm, which we are seeing from the lower aspect, and posteriorly we can see the muscle covered by the fascia, and this fascia will continue anteriorly as the fascia transversalis. See a few diagrams to show the continuation of the fascia. This was asked to me by Renuka. Renuka had asked me to do this. So when she takes the lecture, you all will be oriented for the, I think she has a topic on this.
Yeah, failed back surgery.
Yeah. So these are a few diagrams to show the continuation of the thoracolumbar fascia. So this is all about the anatomy of the back.